Donald Trump is a huge hit when he goes to Madison Square Garden for the UFC fight this weekend. Want to show that to you and remind you how Joe Biden has always been remembered by sports crowds. Also, Megan Rapinoe down for the count, a career-ending injury, and she blames the God she doesn't really believe in. And we've got more protests, ugly, horrible protests from these pro-Hamas people in London and here in the United States. Is it really a rising tide of anti-Semitism in the West, or is something a little more nefarious going on? We'll answer that question and a whole lot more. It's time for the new edition on this Monday live, brought to you by the Electronic Payments Coalition. Let's go. All right, President Trump went to Madison Square Garden over the weekend, and he brought a bit of an entourage with him, including Kid Rock, his son Don Trump Jr., and Tucker Carlson. And take a look at this entrance.
Way into the building, one of the bigger mixed martial arts fans I know, President Donald Trump, taking his octagon side seat for UFC 295. We got two title fights.
Can I just say, look at Tucker Carlson living his best life here. Look at him. Look at that smile. I mean, who wouldn't be enjoying this moment? What a rush that must be. By the way, that's Dana White, the bald gentleman there. Some people thought that was Joe Rogan. And by some people, I mean me. For a minute there in a picture, I thought it was Joe Rogan because, of course, he does the play-by-play for UFC. But it's not. That's Dana White. He's actually the head of UFC. He's the president of UFC. He recently just signed a sponsorship with Bud Light. Why is this man smiling? All right, a little bit more of this entrance.
Coming up at UFC 295 here in a matter of moments, live from Madison Square Garden. And President Trump will be here to witness all of it. Four of the very best fighters in the world set to take their cracks at light heavyweight and interim heavyweight gold, respectively. We move over to pay-per-view shortly. Thank you all for being here for the prelim coverage. But as you know, best is yet to come. Main card for UFC 295, live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view.
What an amazing scene, honestly. And I want to show you one other perspective. Somebody had a camera down on the floor, all right? And this actually gives you an even better scope of the reaction Donald Trump got at this sold-out arena. And I want to remind you, this is Madison Square Garden in New York City, surrounded by New York State and New Jersey and Connecticut. And last I checked, these are supposedly solid blue Democrat states. Wait, are you telling me that a bunch of people from West Virginia and Alabama came up to New York for UFC? It's something to behold. I mean, that's quite a scene. You can't deny it. Now, to be fair, like I said, it is New York, and he was sitting there at Celebrity Row, and it turns out not everybody's a big fan of the Donald. This is Bill Barr here, that bald gentleman I'm circling there with my green finger, and I believe this is his wife sitting next to him. There it is. Poor Bill. Stay classy, people, all right? There are cameras everywhere. But I want to say Clay Travis, the radio talk show host, owner of Outkick, you see him on Fox News, he tweeted out one of those crowd scenes with all the fans cheering for Donald Trump at UFC. And he asked a pretty interesting question, Clay Travis did. He said, do you think Joe Biden could get this kind of response from a crowd for a sporting event anywhere in this country? It's a legitimate question. Do you think that if Joe Biden showed up and made an entrance like that at any sporting event in this country, do you think the response would be anything like what Donald Trump just got from UFC at Madison Square Garden? Now, I'm not sure. I'll be honest. I've been thinking about it. To be fair, Joe Biden doesn't even have to show up at a sporting event for his name to be evoked. Don't forget, college football fans used to chant his name on a regular basis. And, of course, famously, a crowd at a NASCAR race did the same thing.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh, my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and
Is that not the greatest moment of the last 3 years? As lousy as this Biden presidency has been, you know what, with national security crises everywhere around the world, on the brink of war, open border with invaders to the tune of what, 5, 6, 7, 8 million, the economy, the supply chain problems, the divisions in our country, with all of that, it's bad. At least we had that moment. At least we had that moment of the crowd chanting what they were chanting, and then the NBC reporter reinterpreting it for all of us. I don't know about you, but I hear "Let's go, Brandon," which then became a chant at sporting events. Kind of a code. Well, I would like to see if Joe Biden does get a reaction like that at any sporting event in America. I mean, not that. I mean, like what Donald Trump got. I don't know. I mean, maybe at a WNBA game, maybe a women's soccer match, maybe a Canadian transgender powerlifting competition, perhaps, maybe. Oh, speaking of women's soccer, we have a story related to that up and coming sport in just a moment. But first, a quick word for our friends at the National Payments Coalition, NPC. They want to warn you, and I want to warn you about the big box bill. Now, it's actually called the Credit Card Competition Act, but it ain't that. It's a threat to you, to your transactions, to the cost of credit card transactions, and also it's a threat to all those points and rewards that you like so much on that card. I don't know about you. I've got a special card for my favorite airline, and I rack up those points and rewards, and it pays me huge dividends. I was reading thepointsguy.com the other day about this. Do you go to that website? It's a pretty good one. Just a bunch of facts about how best to accrue your points for hotels and for airlines through credit cards and other means. And they were laying out at the Points Guy that if enacted, this legislation would dramatically change the rewards ecosystem. It could hurt your ability to collect and redeem your points and miles toward travel or earn cash back that can offset some of your everyday spending. It's a problem. And we know this because they tried this already. It was called the Durbin Amendment. It was for debit card transactions. They passed that. They promised us big savings. We didn't see them at all. It's just a payoff to the big box stores. That's why the website to inform yourself about this is stopthebigboxbaitandswitch.com. Go there, stopthebigboxbaitandswitch.com. Educate yourself about the bill. And then there's a form right on that website so you can inform your congressman and your senator. You don't want anything to do with this. Thank you for the Electronic Payments Coalition. All right, moving on to women's soccer. I don't know if you saw this or not. Megan Rapinoe, you know, the American-hating, purple-haired transgender activist who really wants men who pretend to be women to be on the women's national team now that she's retired from the national team. It's funny how that works. She was playing in the National Women's Soccer League. Who knew? And she suffered what appears to be a career-ending injury.
If she weren't able to continue. Oh, and this is a player that we know has battled some injuries as of late in her career, and there she goes down, just unattested on the top of your screen, off to a bright start.
It was nowhere near her, actually, when that happened. She just went down. She just twisted her knee, and it appears now to be an Achilles tendon injury, similar to what Aaron Rodgers suffered the first game of the Jets season this year in the NFL. The difference is he actually was in contact with other players, not Megan Rapinoe, and it looks like it's going to end her career. She gave a post-game interview about this, and listen to what she had to say.
And this is a long one, although I'm gonna get the Aaron Rodgers treatment, whatever that is. So I'm gonna be calling him or whoever did his surgery because we need to speed this up. But yeah, I thought about it a little bit. I mean, I'm not a religious person or anything, and if there was a God, like, this is proof that there isn't. This is up. So yeah, it's just because like 6 minutes.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? What a horrible human being. I mean, she just proves it. Every single opportunity she has, she proves what a horrible human being she is. At a moment where she might actually engender some sympathy, she decides to give us this.
Let's speed this up, but yeah, I thought about it a little bit. I mean, I'm not a religious person or anything, and if there was a God, like, this is proof that there isn't.
Tell me you actually know nothing about God without actually telling me you know nothing about God. I'm sure that there are a lot of really intelligent atheists out there who have a much better understanding of God's role in our lives as our creator. But this clearly isn't one of them. It's just abject stupidity. I forgive an atheist if they've actually done their homework and read and searched their soul, if they believe they have a soul, and came up with the conclusion that there's nothing to any of this. But to characterize God as some entity that would never create a circumstance where something bad happened to you is beyond ignorant. It's childish. By the way, not for nothing, some of us who do believe in a God that actually has a set of ethics and morals that we are commanded to follow and adhere our life toward, we would look at this event and say, well, this proves there is a God, that such a horrible thing would befall a charming individual like Megan Rapinoe. I don't want to leave it, though, on this odious creature, because not everybody in professional sports is a selfish, entitled, spoiled little jerk who's just trying to tick you off all the time. No, actually, we got some really good human beings in the world of professional sports. And yesterday, we saw it. Rookie C.J. Stroud, the quarterback for the Houston Texans, who single-handedly so far this season has turned that franchise around. He was the #1 draft pick last year. He started as a rookie, and he's having a phenomenal season and actually getting the Houston Texans in playoff contention right now. After his game yesterday, beating the Cincinnati Bengals, he said this about God.
For me, I mean, it's a lot of prayer, a lot of just knowing that, man, God wouldn't put anything on me that I can't handle. I don't deserve His grace and His mercy, but He still gives it to me, and I love Him for that. Because I mean, it's not about me; it's about Him, and His glory. So I think that's where it comes from. I think God made me like that. I've been through a lot, not only in football, but things that made me just kind of chill during when everything's going crazy. And I thank God for putting that on me, because that's something that.
Yeah. There's actually some really good people out there. And if you had your choice as to who you could spend an evening with and enjoy a dinner with, who would you pick? The purple-haired one or that unique hairstyle? For that matter, who would you rather your daughter bring home as their new boyfriend or special friend? All right, we move now on to the ongoing protests around the world in support of the Hamas terrorists. And this, sadly, is just a month after the October 7th massacre. We turn first to London. In London, they were celebrating what they call Remembrance Day. Here in America, we've got Veterans Day at this weekend, and then we have Memorial Day in May. In London, in England, in the UK, they have Remembrance Day. That's why you see everybody, all the Brits wearing the poppies. It goes back to World War I. And this is kind of their Memorial Day and their Veterans Day combined. And in London, the pro-Hamas Palestinian supporters decided to march en masse this weekend, specifically to disrupt the Remembrance Day events. In fact, they congregated around the war memorials downtown. Take a look at things here. Watch what this citizen journalist got one of the protesters to say directly on camera.
What was that, sorry?
I don't behind police.
Why?
You little waste man as well. You think I don't know what you see on the net? Hide them behind the camera. Wallahi, I know who you are. I promise you, if the police wasn't here, I would end you. Wallahi, I'd end you. Wallahi, I'd end you. Bro.
He identifies him as a Zionist. I do love that he says you're hiding behind your camera while he's wearing a face mask to hide his identity. Who's hiding here, pal? He says, he calls the guy a Zionist and says, if the police weren't here, I would end you. I would end you. But, you know, it's really just about occupation. And, speaking of that, we keep hearing there's no anti-Semitism involved here. This has to do with the state of Israel and their apartheid tactics against the Palestinian people. Really? Well, here's another video from London.
Killers! Death to all the Jews! Fucking Hitler!
I don't know if you caught that last one, so I'm going to play it for you one more time. That lovely woman who came into the frame there, what she had to say, it's killers, killers, death to the Jews. Not the Israeli government, the IDF, the Zionists who support the apartheid government of Israel. No, the Jews. Death to the Jews.
Death to all the Jews! Fucking Hitler!
Death for the Jews. Meanwhile, the scene downtown, right near Westminster Abbey and Big Ben, it got a little dicey as a bunch of soccer hooligans, football lads, they like to call them, decided to make their trek for Remembrance Day. They wanted to go to the War Memorial. They were blocked by the police from going there. The police in London gave deference to the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist protesters. They let them occupy. You talk about an occupation. They let them occupy the war memorial, and they pushed back against the Brits who wanted to go there and pay their respect.
There we go.
I want to be clear here. From all of the reports on the ground in London, this is not the police trying to calm a riot because there was violence and these football hooligans came in there to crash the skulls of the Palestinian protesters. No, literally, they arrived to pay respects at the war memorial. And because the police feared that some violence might happen, and the Palestinian marchers had surrounded the war memorial, the police decided that they had to keep the Brits, these English folks, from coming and paying their respects at the memorial. And as you can see, they weren't very happy about that. It actually gets even a little uglier, and of course, the crowd is angry at the cops for doing that, the bobbies. So that's what happened in London. Now let's take a look at home here. Yeah, that's right. That's home. That's America. In fact, that's not just America. That's not New York. That's not DC. That's not Chicago. That's Austin, Texas. If you watch a lot of the cable news coverage of these marches and these protests and the inevitable violence that ensues, there's a couple of things that I want you to note. First, please notice, and I've been scouring these videos, I've been watching them all day long. As you can tell, we got to curate them and find the best ones for you every day. Without fail, every single time violence breaks out in these protests, it's the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, masked Hamas Antifa types who begin the violence every time. And I mean every time. Let me just repeat that. Every time. Whether it's LA, New York, DC, Austin, every time. So I want you to note that as you watch these things, because the way the media is covering it, they're trying, well, you know, there are very fine people on both sides, is what they'll tell you. You'll also hear certain tropes carted out. Some of it is deliberate. Some of it is just lazy journalism, because they like to use this sonorous voice of the narrator. And they always use the same kind of phrases in the media. Have you noticed? It's like they all have the same script. And I guarantee you have heard this, or you have read this, or you have seen this since these protests have occurred on an almost daily basis in our country. You'll hear the rising tide of anti-Semitism in America, right? You'll hear that all the time. The rising tide of anti-Semitism in America. Now, to be fair, they were saying this during the Trump era, but back then they were telling us that if somebody, you know, made this symbol in a picture, that was an indication of the rising tide of anti-Semitism in America, right? Remember the good old days when the rising tide of anti-Semitism in America was somebody doing this? And of course, that was a lie. We see where the anti-Semitism is, and we also see exactly who was the stalwart defender and protector of the state of Israel and our Jewish neighbors here in America and around the world. We see exactly who those people are, and we see the ones who were chanting from the river to the sea and actually, you know, marching the halls of Congress with that chanting in their head. But about this rising tide of anti-Semitism in America that they keep repeating over and over again, it's a lie. It's a lie. Don't get me wrong. We're seeing anti-Semitism here in America, and it is our problem. We have to fix it. We have to do something about it. But when they use the phrase rising tide of anti-Semitism in America, it makes it sound like anti-Semitism has been simmering and under wraps here in America. And now it's starting to really bubble up and explode. But it's been here. It's an American problem. It's in the American DNA. And now we've got the rising tide. That's not what's happening. You know that's not what's happening. Where did this come from? We imported it. It's obvious what's happening here. You know it. I know it. We all know it. This was deliberate. We have imported people into this country who come from nations that breed this kind of hate. It's built into their country's constitution. It's embedded into the school systems that these people grew up with. And then we opened up our doors for asylum, for refugees, for immigration, for what have you, without any vetting, without any demand to embrace e pluribus unum, to embrace our culture, to say you're welcome to come to America, but there's a few fundamentals that you have to agree with and adhere to. This is new. It's not something that's been a constant in this country. Not this, not what you're seeing here. And there's, frankly, one political party right now who would love to actually maximize and increase the number of people that we're importing that embrace this kind of hate. And it is hate. And it's anti-American. Want proof? Okay. Let's move from Austin to New York City, where they had their own protests over the weekend. And this was the scene right outside the UN on East 43rd Street, where one of the pro-ceasefire protesters, again with their face masked by a cloth that represents terrorists, climbing a streetlight pole. And, well, you'll see. ripping down the American flag and the UN flag to make way for the Palestinian flag. That's not a symbol of the rising tide of American anti-Semitism. That is an anti-Jew hatred that this country and previous presidents have deliberately imported for their own cynical political gain. Now, I want to repeat, it is an American problem. It's here, and we have to deal with it. We have to fix it. But this is why, over the centuries, when you always hear people like Jim Acosta and other people, sanctimonious reporters and politicians say, you know, we've always welcomed people, and we're the great hope of the tired and poor and huddled masses. And that's true. We have been that from the beginning in this country. But we've always done a couple of things. First of all, we've always had a secure border. And if you want to immigrate here, you got to at least follow our immigration rules, sign the book on your way in, like you would demand at even a cheap motel, let alone the greatest country on the planet. And oh, by the way, if you want to be here, you need to leave your ties to your home country aside, embrace our common culture, our common ideals, and embrace what it is to be an American. And we haven't put those demands, at least not on these people. All right, moving on to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. You've heard me tell you about the rising crime problem here. And just last night in the Tony neighborhood of Georgetown, the rising crime problem hit home for the Biden family as the SUV for Secret Service agents protecting the granddaughter of Joe Biden, Naomi Biden, was broken into. And what happened next? Well, Peter Ducey will tell you.
Protect President Biden's granddaughter. Peter?
Yes, the carjacking and car stealing problem in Washington, D.C. has now extended to somebody with Secret Service protection. At 11:58 p.m. last night in Georgetown, which is about a mile and a half from where we're standing right now, Secret Service officers who are assigned to protect Naomi Biden, that's President Biden's granddaughter, Hunter Biden's daughter, opened fire at 3 people who were trying to steal one of the Secret Service vehicles. We don't know exactly what kind of a car this was, but according to the Secret Service, who just sent us a statement, Secret Service agents encountered possibly 3 individuals breaking a window on a parked and unoccupied government vehicle. During the encounter, a federal agent discharged a service weapon, and it is believed no one was struck. The offenders immediately fled the scene in a red vehicle, and a regional lookout was issued to supporting units. That means that somebody tried to steal a Secret Service car from the agents that were protecting the president's granddaughter, and they got away. They're still out there this morning. Back to you.
Wow, that's crazy. They got away.
I can't believe they got away, but I can't believe they would target the president's granddaughter's car. They picked the wrong car to break into.
There are so many cars that are getting broken into in Washington, D.C. It's possible, just based on the volume, that they had no idea. Yeah. But if they did know, that's even more extraordinary. Either way, these guys are out there in a red car.
Right. If they got the car, I wonder if she had an Apple tag. That was the instruction. Get an Apple tag and drop it in there. All right. Thanks so much, Peter. More Fox and Friends right after a quick.
Yeah, Kilmeade ain't joking. The mayor last week actually did do that. We got a real car theft and carjacking problem here, so we've got a solution. And we're all like, oh, you're going to actually prosecute the law? You're going to arrest people and keep them behind bars instead of letting them out on cash-free bail because criminal justice reform and inherent racism in our judicial system, defund the police. I mean, that's what they've been doing, right? You're going to prosecute them. You're going to keep them behind bars. No. The solution here in D.C. was give everybody an Apple tag. So when your car inevitably gets stolen or carjacked, we'll be able to track it down. That's what they've done here. Now, there's no evidence that these car thieves actually targeted this vehicle because it was the granddaughter of Joe Biden's or the Secret Service vehicle of the people protecting Joe Biden, but there were Joe Biden's granddaughter. But there's a couple of things here that I hope you caught. First of all, Secret Service agent opened fire and shot at these people as they were fleeing and missed. You're You're just shooting willy-nilly in Georgetown at people as they're running away from you, and where'd the bullet land? Or was this like a warning shot? That's, I don't think, typical protocol for the Secret Service, but I'm sure they'll let us know one way or the other. But secondly, and more importantly, folks, if you come here to Washington, D.C., or if you live here or in the area, and you are the victim of any kind of crime, whether it's car theft or carjacking or pretty much anything, first of all, you're not even allowed to have a gun to protect yourself. And if you do have a gun to protect yourself, if you open fire, there'd be a problem. Your problem. You'd be the one they go after, the victim. No. You're not allowed to have a gun to protect yourself. Wouldn't it be great if everyone in D.C. who has to deal with the dysfunction that's been thrust upon us by a completely dominated Democrat-run government, and I mean every level of government in Washington, D.C. is dominated by Democrats. Not one Republican has anything to say, nor have they had anything to say in D.C. for the last several decades. This is the Democrat Party's utopia, and look what we got. If any one of us have to deal with the crime here by protecting ourselves, utilizing our Second Amendment right, we're the ones going to jail. Do not pass go, and do not collect $200. Wouldn't it be great if we could all protect ourselves the way Naomi Biden, the granddaughter of the president, Hunter Biden's daughter, gets protected? Yeah, it would be very great. And speaking of cities completely dominated by Democrats, you know how bad things have gotten in San Francisco, right? I mean, the crime, the open-air drug markets, people living on the streets, criminal vagrants, not homeless, not our unhoused neighbors. No, criminal vagrants living on the streets, not sleeping on the streets because they can't find a soft pillow or a warm bed. No, they're choosing to live on the streets, live there and conduct their business there. Business like drug dealing or prostitution. They urinate on the streets. They defecate on the streets. They fornicate on the streets. And for years now, the Democrats who control that city and the state of California have told us, well, there's nothing we can do about it. They have every right to be there. They have a constitutional right to be there. The only thing we can do is build $500,000 condos with your tax dollars and move them in there, or confiscate empty hotel rooms and move them in there if we want to get them off the streets. But, you know, who are we to arrest people for being poor? It's like, I'm sorry, you're not arresting them for being poor. That's an insult to all the poor people who don't live and urinate and defecate and fornicate on the streets. There's tons of poor people who don't debase themselves and debase society by creating a criminal, dangerous environment like this. It's not against the law to be poor. It's against the law to be a criminal vagrant on our streets. But in California, I guess it's a right. Well, that's what they've been telling us, at least. We can't do anything about it. There's nothing to be done. Really? Well, if that's the case, you'll love this local report from San Francisco.
While San Francisco is in the spotlight for the Asia Pacific Economic Conference, city leaders are making sure the city shines.
Tourism is our business here in San Francisco, and we need to focus on making sure that the tourist dollars still come back.
Caltrans repaving major roadways like the Harrison Street off-ramp from the I-80. BART doubling down by deep cleaning their stations overnight more often.
The city had gotten a little bit dingy over time.
Scrubbing and power washing is happening all over the city.
Yeah, the bottom of my shoes look clean.
It's noticeable how clear the streets look and how few homeless encampments there are on major thoroughfares.
And what's the difference? How did they do this? How did they possibly figure out the way to clean out the streets and get rid of homeless encampments and power wash sidewalks? And what did the guy with the pink feather say? Dingy? Dingy? It was rancid. Your gag reflex hit when you walk down those streets, let alone in mass transit. If you ride the BART, you were holding your breath the whole time. Dingy, pal? Dingy? Seriously, though, nice hat, nice feather. So what's the difference maker? How did they finally see the light and figure out that they should do something about the filth in San Francisco? Well, they're about to have a very special visit from a foreign dignitary. Xi Jinping, the chairman of the Communist Party in Beijing. Yeah, you know, the authoritarian dictator who oversees slave labor and ethnic cleansing of the Uyghurs, who censors the media and refuses to allow anybody in China to actually openly speak or protest against his government because, you know, he's a communist dictator. That's what they do. He's coming to visit San Francisco. And so San Francisco is pulling out all the stops and they're cleaning up the city to impress the communist dictator. The people of San Francisco, the citizens of San Francisco, the taxpayers of San Francisco, you've been begging for this kind of treatment. You've been moving out of that city and out of that state in droves because they won't listen to you or do what you want to clean up the streets and the city and the sidewalks and make it safe for you to walk your child to the park without falling on a hypodermic needle or sliding down the slide and landing in a pile of urine or feces. You've been demanding that they do this, and they've given you the hand. They've called you a bigot. They've called you unfeeling. They've called you a fascist for demanding that your city is cleaned up and your streets are safe for you and your children and your elderly grandparents to be able to walk around and enjoy it. But Xi Jinping, a communist dictator, well, we better mobilize now. At least we know where their priorities are. Vote accordingly. Did I mention that city is dominated by Democrats? And the county? And the state? In fact, the governor of that state wants a promotion. He'd like to be your president. That's it for today's show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for following and locking in and commenting and doing all the things that you do because it keeps us going and keeps us happy. And we'll see you next time. I'm Larry O'Connor, but I want you to call me Larry. We'll see you next time.